Welcome in, everybody, to the FFWC Video Showdown. I am your host, Billy Musio. I'll be representing Full-Time Fantasy during this best ball extravaganza. I am joined by some of the brightest minds in the industry, representing sites as well as the high-stakes industry. We have Fantasy Alarm, the GOAT District, FF Diagnostic, FF Faceoff, the 33rd Team, Football Diehards, Full-Time Fantasy, of course, First and 15, Player Profiler, Draft Sharks, Fantasy Pros, and Best Bell Fantasy, who all will be competing for a $350 prize for the Player Profiler Championship in 2023. During this Best Ball Extravaganza in the FFWC Video Showdown, every analyst will be submitting their own analysis of their picks. Every single pick, every single round will have video analysis so that you, the listener, the subscribers, can better understand what's going on in the minds of a high-stakes player or an analyst during their time on the clock. Who do they select? Why did they select them? Was there another player they considered? What are their projections? Listen and find out, because the FFWC Video Showdown is about to kick off right now.
Nothing but time, use it to grind. They huff and they puff it, this bacon is mine. Stakes are all high, your stakes are so dry. I'm as rare as they come, put it all on the line. Losing very doubtful, cause I'm winning every outcome. I'm impressed by his guess, there's no reason to guess. Drafting like I won the lotto, but it's grind every day. Managing teams is just part of the game. Free agents, lineups, they all in one place. This is the content, they can't be replaced. Speaking of place, first is the option. Win is the goal and I do it real often. Tournament entries, I already bought them. I bury the field, that's the nail in the coffin. Checking my watch, checking my clock. Grind is the time, I ain't never gonna stop. Digital, analog, never gonna stop. You ain't never gonna stop, I ain't never gonna stop. Checking my watch, checking my clock. Grind is the time, I ain't never gonna stop. Digital, analog, never gonna stop. You ain't never gonna stop, I ain't never gonna stop. Cause it's grind time, let's go.
With the first pick in the FFWC Video Challenge, Fantasy Alarm selects Christian McCaffrey. Yes, some folks might think that's a controversial pick because they want Jonathan Taylor. Here's the thing about Taylor's season. He only caught 40 passes in 17 games. Christian McCaffrey came out and caught 37 passes in only 7 games. And he actually got hurt in the last one before he could even catch a pass. So in reality, he basically caught the same number of passes as Taylor did in the full season in only 6 games, right? The thing about McCaffrey is he's never been bad, only hurt. And he's currently healthy, so we're not going to try and play Dr. Fortune Teller and guess which healthy backs are going to get seriously injured this season. Last year, of the running backs that started, there were only 7 that played every single game. One of them was Zeke on a torn PCL. So if you're going to avoid running backs for injury purposes, you might as well go 0 RB. For us, we're going to take the best running back for this full PPR format. That's Christian McCaffrey.
This is Theo Gremminger representing the GOAT District. With the second pick in the FFWC Video Showdown, the GOAT District selected Jonathan Taylor. We were thrilled to find Jonathan Taylor there available for us at the second pick. We would have taken him with the 101. Taylor averaged 22 points a game last year, PPR-wise. He was one of the best draft picks you could have possibly made last year. He had a fantastic season. We expect that the offense takes a leap forward with Matt Ryan under center. We think there's some unknown upside where Taylor could see a career high in targets and receptions, which could push him even more over the top. The offensive line play is very strong in Indianapolis. This was an easy pick and a slam dunk for us at the 102.
With pick 103, Fantasy Football Diagnostics selects Justin Jefferson. Was hoping that either Jonathan Taylor or Christian McCaffrey would make it to me here, but they did not. So I select the guy I believe will finish as the wide receiver 1 in fantasy football this year. The reason for that, Kevin O'Connell comes over from the Rams, where he was the offensive coordinator, now comes over to be the head coach, and he's completely different than Mike Zimmer in terms of how he likes to call plays. And Mike Zimmer would like to run the football, and that was the focal point, was running game and his defense. With Justin Jefferson, we're going to see potentially more pass volume here, as the Rams were 7th in the NFL last year with a 58% pass rate on early down neutral games, meaning first and second down when the score was within 6 points or less. In the first half, the Rams again were 7th, where the Vikings were well near the bottom of the league at just 49% compared to the 58% for the Rams. So that more passing volume, more creative offense, to see Justin Jefferson move around a lot more, I think that should equate to him having a really good fantasy season and potentially being the wide receiver one.
What's going on, everybody? My name is Anthony Servino of the FF Faceoff. Follow me on Twitter at The Real NFL Guru. And I'm here with my first pick in the FFWC Best Ball Video Showdown. I was picking from the number 4 hole, and with that selection, I went with Austin Ekeler, CMC, JT, Justin Jefferson, all off the board. I love going running back early, and in my rankings, I have Ekeler as my RB3. I would draft him ahead of CMC. I drafted a lot of drafts, as many of us do, so I'm going to switch things around. So I'm extremely happy with Austin Ekeler coming off of career high in rushing attempts, touches, total touchdowns, 21.5 fantasy points per game last season. Good for the RB2 in that category, the RB2 overall in PPR scoring formats. Austin Ekeler is attached to a high-octane offense with Justin Herbert at quarterback, a bunch of outstanding weapons around him, and it's no surprise that Austin Ekeler was outstanding running the football last year. The one big thing with the Chargers for years was their offensive line. Well, they've addressed their offensive line for each of the past 3 off seasons, including this one. This is going to be the best offensive line Austin Ekeler has ever run behind. And number 3 running back in weighted opportunities, Austin Ekeler, I believe, has overall RB1 upside in 2022 if he can play a full 17-game schedule.
At 105, the 33rd team selects Jamar Chase. I was also considering Cooper Kupp in that range. Justin Jefferson was already off the board. McCaffrey, Taylor off the board, and that's kind of who I view as the big 5, is those 2 running backs and those 3 receivers. Right now I have Jamar Chase as a baseline projection, 98 catches, 1,513 yards, and about 12 touchdowns. That to me sounds pretty good. I like that the Bengals upgraded the offensive line. They played fairly slowly last year. That might have been because of Burrow's ACL injury, so we might have an increased pace of play. We might have an increased pass rate too. Mixon's getting older. He was very healthy last year. A season of worse health for Mixon. The pass rate could shoot up that way. There's just so many different avenues to Jamar Chase breaking fantasy for this season.
With pick 106, the football diehards select Titans running back Derrick Henry. I currently have Henry ranked 3rd overall, followed closely by Cooper Kupp. Briefly considered Kupp here, but feel like we're drafting that once-in-a-lifetime season with him, and I prefer the more consistent high-end production with Henry. Yes, he missed the final 9 games last season with a foot injury, but he did return for the divisional round game against the Bengals and got 20 carries. Wasn't an outstanding performance, but it lends confidence in the belief Tennessee will continue to lean on him as the primary weapon in their run-heavy offense this season. Remember, Henry ran 219 times in the first 8 weeks last year and was fantasy's highest scoring running back by a wide margin at that point. So even if they dial back slightly, expecting 350 carries, 1,500 yards, double-digit touchdowns, doesn't seem like a reach. Happy to have him.
Welcome in, everybody. Billy Muzio here with Full Time Fantasy. I'm going to be picking from the 107 today. And well, what a pleasant surprise. Cooper Kupp just happened to fall to me at the 107. And man, isn't this a beautiful thing? His previous low was 105 in all of FFWC drafts through the 2022 season. His average is pick 102, only behind Jonathan Taylor. And he just came off a monstrous season, finishing with 1,947 yards, behind only Calvin Johnson, who just happened to also be receiving balls from Matt Stafford. And what a magnificent season did Cooper Kupp have. He was number 1 in red zone targets with 38. He had 27 red zone receptions. Number 1 in total touchdowns with 16. He had a 10.7 touchdown rate in 2021. Number 1 in fantasy points per game at 25.9. Number 1 in receiving yards with 1,947, number 1 in receptions with 145, number 1 in yards after the catch with 855, number 1 in yards per route run with 3.33, number 1 in formation adjusted yards per route with 3.29, and the list just continues on and on and on. You don't need me to tell you that Cooper Kupp had an amazing year in 2021. He still has Matt Stafford as quarterback. Now he has Allen Robinson opposite of him to draw off some more defensive coverage. Cooper Kupp is going to have another big year here in 2022. Thank you for the gift at the 107.
With the 8th pick, team 1st and 15 chooses Buffalo wide receiver Steffon Diggs.
This was really an easy decision for me to make. Number one, just understanding the format. It's a 3 wide receiver, 1 flex setup. So immediately I'm thinking I want me at least 1 top tier wide receiver. And for me personally, Steffon Diggs was next best available. He's in a high powered offense, has a great quarterback, sees a ton of targets, sees a ton of end zone targets as well. I want to say he led the league in that last year. And he was actually inefficient to some degree last year compared to his years previously. So I like to see some improvement in that efficiency, more catches, more yards, more touchdowns, could potentially be this year's number 1 wide receiver.
Yeah. I mean, for me, just the way he started last season just kind of scares me a little bit, which is why I'm slightly hesitant about Steffon Diggs. I definitely agree with this 3 wide receiver roster build. I like going wide receiver early.
Yep.
Maybe we would have considered maybe Davante Adams there. I don't really remember who else was around that spot. Not CeeDee Lamb. I definitely like Diggs over Lamb. Maybe Mike Evans, if you want to kind of get a little crazy with it.
I don't know about the first.
With this being best ball, So
Let's see
that's
what
just kind of how I
happens.
see it. But I like Diggs. I didn't fight it, and I definitely like him over the running
All
backs.
right, let's see what happens next.
All right, guys, it's in the books.
All right, with pick 109, the Podfather in this draft room full of sharks. The Podfather selects Davante Adams. Now, why Davante Adams? I don't have Davante Adams as our number 9 overall player, but it's called strategy. It's called opportunity cost. It's called game theory. The opportunity cost of passing on Davante Adams is just too great. Billy and I host a show called The Dominator, and I tried drafting a running back at the 109 already, and it didn't go well because both Steffon Diggs and Davante Adams were gone, and I didn't like my choices in the 2nd round at wide receiver. I don't want to draft Tyreek Hill. Get out of here. I want a Davante Adams, number 1 among wide receivers the last 5 years in receiving yards, in receiving touchdowns, in receptions, and everything. He is elite. He's a Hall of Famer. He's still in his prime. He has his old college quarterback. They're going to be playing in the AFC West with all these shootouts every week, often from behind. He may not match his numbers with Aaron Rodgers, but I think he'll get damn close. He may not have a Cooper Kupp-like season, but when you're drafting based on game theory to structurally create the best possible roster that is teed up for success, I want Davante Adams knowing I can get a running back I love in round 2.
What's up, everybody? This is Adam Krautwurst of DraftSharks.com. And with the 10th pick in this FFWC Showdown draft, I took Saquon Barkley. Saquon Barkley is our RB6 over at DraftSharks.com. Loved taking him there. We've been taking Barkley at DraftSharks since the 3rd round of these early drafts, and I'm still okay with taking him in the 1st round as we get closer to the season here. Coming off an ACL from 2 years ago, we think he's going to be fully back from that. His offensive line got better. They drafted someone at the 7th overall pick, Evan Neal. They signed Mark Glowinski to upgrade one of the 2 guard spots, so the O-line's going to be better. Brian Daboll is in town, the former Bills offensive coordinator. So we like that. Get rid of that old regime. They're terrible. Saquon Barkley is only 25 years old. He's going to be electric. He's going to be better behind that line. They're talking about lining him up at wide receiver. I know they always say stuff like that, but I think he gets back to his old form. He was going to get back there last year, and it just didn't happen because of the ankle injury. But Saquon Barkley, pick 10. Absolutely love it.
This is Pat Fitzmaurice of Fantasy Pros, and with the 11th pick in the FFWC Best Ball Video Showdown, I picked Dalvin Cook, and I'll admit I've got some regrets about this pick. In hindsight, I think I would have taken CeeDee Lamb at 111 because there were still some running backs I liked who would have been available at 202, either Cook, Najee Harris, or DeAndre Swift. And, I hate being caught short at wide receiver, and it looks like I'm going to be caught that way because there aren't really going to be any wide receivers I love at 202. I don't think the value is there. I think it's going to be a running back. I do love the player with Dalvin Cook. 5 years in the league, 112.8 total yards per game, 42 touchdowns in 56 games. I think the offensive line in Minnesota is better than it has been for most of Dalvin Cook's career. I think I'm excited about the scheme change with Kevin O'Connell coming in, running the Rams system as a Sean McVay disciple. I just wish I would have played this one a little bit differently.
With the 1.12, Bradley Stalder of Best Bell Fantasy selects Travis Kelce. And Kelsey's the slam dunk first tight end off the board. He's been the tight end one since 2016, except for last year when he was the tight end too. But if you look at the deeper metrics, it's just that Mark Andrews had a couple higher spike weeks than Travis Kelce. Kelce still led all tight ends with a rate of 62% of the time, getting at least 15.5 PPR fantasy points. That was most among tight ends. Second closest to Mark Andrews, only at about 44% of the time. So there was still a clear difference between the consistency that Travis Kelce was putting forth last year with Tyreek Hill in the lineup. Now Tyreek Hill is gone and he's replaced by Sky Moore, Marquez Valdez, Scantling, and Juju Smith-Schuster, none of which can do what Travis Kelce does and what he's been doing. So I'm confident taking him at the end of the first round. And then at the 2.01, at the 1-2 turn, I took CeeDee Lamb as my first wide receiver off the board, and my projections for CeeDee Lamb are about the wide receiver 5 from last season. So I just finished projections for the Dallas Cowboys, and I have a 26% target share for Lamb, 177 targets, 114 receptions, 8 yards per target, almost 1,500 receiving yards, nearly 9 touchdowns, and 267 half PPR points. Now, this is full PPR, and I like seeing 114 receptions and a 65% catch rate for CeeDee Lamb. The Dallas Cowboys are fast-paced, and we've seen Dak Prescott be one of the most consistently high-ceiling quarterbacks over the last 3 seasons. Give me CeeDee Lamb in this Dallas Cowboys offense.
This is Pat Fitzmaurice of Fantasy Pros, and with pick 202 in the FFWC Best Ball Video Showdown, I went with Najee Harris. So I'm starting running back, like the value that I get with the Dalvin Cook Najee Harris combination, although I'm a little disappointed in myself for not getting at least one wide receiver here. Najee, high volume. You're not going to beat the sort of volume he's going to get. I know the Steelers have talked about curtailing his volume just a bit, but I don't see how they can realistically do that when the drop-off between Najee and the bench running backs the Steelers have is so great. Najee, bull of a runner, catches passes, not a ton of breakaway potential. We didn't have him see many long runs, really none, I think, over 20 yards until like the final couple of games of the season. But yeah, I do have some reservations. The Steelers' offensive line is not good, but Najee overcame that last year and put together a heck of a season. So can't beat a high volume guy like Najee here. So I'll take it. And my running back starts.
Hey guys, Adam Krautwurst here of DraftSharks.com again. Third pick in the second round, I went Mike Evans. In this format, we have to start 3 receivers. So receiver was on my mind after taking Saquon Barkley at the 110. Mike Evans, future Hall of Famer, probably no Chris Godwin for the first 6 games. No Antonio Brown, touchdown machine. We have Mike Evans over at Draft Sharks. We have him as our wide receiver 7. I took him as the wide receiver 7, but the more important part is he's the last receiver in that group of in that tier of receivers there. So I was happy to get him at the 2.3, starting Saquon and Mike Evans, and I'm probably going to look to pound more receivers in rounds 3 and 4. So I like building my receiving core around Mike Evans. And maybe I'll look to come back and stack him later. But love that pick, Mike Evans at the 2-3.
Now, I took Davante Adams in round 1, and that set me up to let my league mates decide who I was going to draft in round 2. Are my league mates going to let me have Dalvin Cook like they did in another high-stakes league? No. Dalvin Cook was drafted. Am I going to get Najee Harris? Of course not. He was drafted. He was gone, right? Who are they going to give me? Joe Mixon? Who? Well, I had the choice between Joe Mixon and DeAndre Swift. And when I'm deciding between the two, I want the guy that I think could be the RB1 in fantasy. I want the guy that has true league-winning upside and what is going to be a vastly improved offense. We know what the Bengals are. We know what Joe Mixon is. I already have Davante Adams, a guy who we know what he is, right? I wanted to shoot for the moon with my first-round running back, who also has a super high floor in a PPR league as well. But, I mean, we're talking about in a workhorse role, right there with Jonathan Taylor, right there with Christian McCaffrey. It's DeAndre Swift, one of the best all-purpose backs in what will be the most improved offense in the NFL.
All right, at 205, 1st and 15 chooses Tyreek Hill, reluctantly on my behalf, but we chose Tyreek Hill, Miami receiver. How do you guys feel about that pick?
Best ball format, 3 wide receiver setup. I actually like this pick. I think Tyreek Hill is potentially
we had to strong arm him a little bit. You know?
This is a potentially undervalued player at his position. I think people are not quite sure where to put him. So they just throw him at the back end of that tier, where in essence or in reality, he could actually finish at the top of that tier.
But Dayo, why no Aaron Jones?
I mean, it goes back to what we were talking about with the last pick. Just having that wide receiver strength in this type of build with 3 wide receivers starting. I like to go with the highest end wide receiver. And like we were saying in last week's, or what we were saying in one of our previous episodes, Tyreek Hill has the type of ceiling where he can end up being wide receiver 1, 2, 3, 4 by the end of the season. Like, it wouldn't surprise anybody.
Welcome back, everybody. Billy from Full Time Fantasy, and at the 2-6, I selected Aaron Jones, and Aaron Jones is due for a monster season. His splits, while Davante Adams is on and off the field, is night and day difference. With Davante Adams on the field from 2017 to 2021, Aaron Jones saw a difference in the PPR points, 14.88 points versus 22.89 fantasy points. Receptions per game with Davante Adams on the field, 2.49. Without Davante Adams on the field, 4.5 receptions per game. His touchdowns boost up significantly from a 0.14 to a 0.5. His reception yards dramatically increased from 17.83 to 48.5. His rushing touchdowns pretty much the same, 0.59 to 0.75, and his rushing yards slightly down, 62.34 to 60.38. He was the number 6 running back in the league last year in receptions with a 52. With Davante Adams gone, I expect a major bump in usage in the passing game for Aaron Jones. I happily selected him here with my second-round pick. The only other player that I really considered taking here was Joe Mixon. I was hoping for DeAndre Swift, but Aaron Jones will have to do for pick 2.
With pick 207, the football diehards secure Ravens tight end Mark Andrews. With their top wideout, Marquise Brown, shipped off to the Cardinals, the Ravens are left with still unproven Rashad Bateman as their wide receiver 1 and a lackluster cast beyond that. So I fully expect Andrews to remain not only the team's top receiving threat, but their top offensive weapon, not named Lamar Jackson. Granted, 2021 might be the best season Andrews will ever have. It includes some huge weeks when Jackson was injured and his replacements leaving even more heavily on the tight end than Jackson did. But once the dust had cleared, Andrews led all tight ends in air yards, deep targets, and he finished top 3 in routes run, yards per route run, and yards after the catch. What do I expect this season? Well, he's been in the top 2 in end zone targets the last 3 years. Even assuming his scoring average dips a bit, Andrews still gives me weekly leverage over the field and tremendous touchdown upside.
At the 208, the 33rd team selected Leonard Fournette. The other guy I considered here was Joe Mixon, who was also on the board. I know some people prefer Joe Mixon, but the way that I look at it, Leonard Fournette, we just saw as a top 2, top 3 running back in fantasy on any given week, no matter the circumstances, because he gets the goal line work in a very, very good offense. He gets the lion's share of the carries in a very good offense. And he's going to be out on the field for the majority of the snaps and get those valuable Tom Brady dump-offs. I really don't think that Joe Mixon has that type of pass catching in his range of outcomes. Felt to me like Leonard Fournette could be the RB1, RB2 in fantasy. Much tougher for me to see that for Joe Mixon this year when we kind of know that the target share is probably capped at 11 or 12%. Leonard Fournette could be pushing a lot more than that as we've lost Godwin, AB, and Gronk, at least for the start of the 2022 season.
All right, guys, the pick is in. My second pick in this FFWC Best Ball Video Draft Showdown. I went with Joe Mixon, so I start Ekeler 1, Joe Mixon 2, and like Ekeler, Mixon popped last season. Mixon popped for his best fantasy season of his career. For years, we're like, when is Joe Mixon going to pop? Who is Joe Mixon? Is he ever going to be that guy? Well, he proved to everyone that Joe Mixon is, in fact, that guy. The RB5 in fantasy points per game. The overall RB4 in PPR scoring formats. Joe Mixon was outstanding last season. It's no surprise he's attached to that Cincinnati Bengals offense led by Burrow. With those weapons on the outside, Joe Mixon can tear up the middle of the football field. And while Joe Mixon doesn't get as many targets as a Kamara or DeAndre Swift, he was still the number 4 back in weighted opportunities. And I love the weighted opportunity metric from Player Profiler. It's one of the best predictive metrics for opportunity at the running back position. So I like to target running backs who are really good in that metric. He was also the number 7 back in snap share. Samaje Perine's not a threat to any of his touches. He was also the number 5 back in red zone touches with 50 of them, including 13 goal line carries. So this is Mixon's backfield. I know the whole bell cow thing, it's rare in the NFL now, but Joe Mixon is one of those outlier running backs. He's also pretty elusive when he gets the football in his hand. Number 7 in evaded tackles, number 7 in breakaway runs. So when Joe Mixon does have the football in his hands in open space, he's going to get the job done. He's going to score touchdowns. Joe Mixon actually last season had a career-high 16 total touchdowns, the 4th best running back in that category. I'm pushing the chips in on Joe Mixon. I think he's a terrific value, especially in the second round of your fantasy football drafts. And get this, last year, the Bengals' offensive line was amongst the worst in the NFL. They still made their massive Super Bowl run. However, per Pro Football Focus, and I'm going to quote this from one of their articles, the Cincinnati Bengals offensive line is the most improved offensive line in the NFL, at least on paper. They're ranked as the number 8 best offensive line entering training camp in the preseason at PFF. They added Ted Karras and Alex Kapp on the inside, outstanding right tackle Al Collins, old protector of Dak Prescott on the outside. So this offensive line, potentially 3 new starters to go along with the group last year that was absolutely terrible. So if Mixon was that good in 2021, just imagine how good Joe Mixon is going to be this season with a much improved offensive line. Joe Mixon in the second round, slam dunk. I'll take it all day long.
With the 10th pick in the second round, Fantasy Football Diagnostics selects San Francisco wide receiver Deebo Samuel, or San Francisco wide back Deebo Samuel, however you want to call him. I know right now he's a little bit undervalued because of the contract situation and the holdout. I'm betting that the Niners figure it out, or Deebo Samuel shows up and is able to play and play at a high level like we saw last year. I've got him currently as the wide receiver 5. I think that he does probably take less rushing opportunities than he did last year, but he was explosive as a receiver. Between weeks 1 and 8, he had a total of 6 rush attempts. But during that time, he was on a 17-game pace of almost 1,900 yards receiving. So I do have him hitting the 1,200-yard mark receiving, adding another 100 or 100 to 200 yards rushing. I think Deebo Samuel is definitely going to continue to be a force for the San Francisco 49ers going forward.
This is Theo Gremminger, representing the GOAT District. With the 11th pick in the second round, the GOAT District selects Tee Higgins. We were very happy to add Higgins as our wide receiver 1 after selecting Jonathan Taylor. it's always interesting to add a potential wide receiver 2 in an offense, and we expect Higgins to play somewhat of a second fiddle to Jamar Chase this year, but we view Higgins as an alpha-type wide receiver with immense talent. He averaged over 15 points per game last year in his second season in the league. We think he could build upon that this year. We think he has immense touchdown potential. We saw him have 2 touchdown receptions in the Super Bowl. We also saw him go for 96 yards receiving and 103 yards receiving in the 2 weeks prior to the Super Bowl. We think that he's poised to have a massive year 3 in the NFL, and we were thrilled to get him.
With pick number 212 coming back down the end of the swing, Fantasy Alarm picks Nick Chubb. Now, some people are a little scared off because of the split with Kareem Hunt, but even splitting and even missing games, this guy had the second most rushing yards in the league last year. He's capable of monster games. He's capable of monster runs, partially because of his breakaway run rate. In fact, he's one of the top in the league in all the metrics that we care about: breakaway run rate, missed tackles. If you sort every back that has had 400 carries in this league, his career yards per carry is second only to Jonathan Taylor. That's why people say this guy is one of the best pure runners in the game. And if something does happen to Kareem Hunt, now we have a guy that you can only get with pick 2 or 3 in a draft like this. So we're happy to take Christian McCaffrey, and then we'll stack him with Nick Chubb and move on to the next round. With the first pick of the third round, Fantasy Alarm takes Keenan Allen. We already have a couple running backs in Christian McCaffrey and Nick Chubb. Now we need a nice, solid wide receiver. And I know guys like the Podfather and Josh Alarkey are in this draft, but guess what? We have access to Player Profiler too. So we pop on over there. We look for the key metrics we're looking for in wide receivers. We're looking for snap share. We're looking for target share. We're looking for explosive offenses. You go to Keenan Allen, you see that he has a top 10 snap share. He ran the second most routes of any wide receiver. He got 25% of the balls that they threw over there. And we know that Justin Herbert is a young, up-and-coming gunslinger. The targets are once again going to be pretty highly consolidated among Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Austin Ekeler. That's how they roll over there. So we're happy to take Keenan Allen, staple him into our lineup, and leave him there.
With the second pick in the third round, the GOAT District selects A.J. Brown. We had a Jonathan Taylor in the first round, and we followed up with 2 wide receivers. We love the structure of going wide receiver, back-to-back for this format. A.J. Brown is a player that we just absolutely love the talent on. He got traded to Philadelphia this past offseason. There are question marks about the passing volume for him in Philadelphia with Jalen Hurts as his quarterback. We are taking a bullish approach on the fact that we think that the passing volume will increase in Philadelphia as a whole, and we think that the offense itself could be very much improved, and it's a classic example of the pie is larger type argument. A.J. Brown is an absolute baller. He had 3 games last year with double-digit targets, and in 2 of those games, he went for 145 yards and 155 yards. Could be a smash season in Philly.
With the third pick in the third round, Fantasy Football Diagnostics selects New Orleans Saints running back Alvin Kamara. He would be much higher for me. Right now, he's RB9 for me, but he'd be much higher if it wasn't for this looming suspension, which many will believe will be about 6 games. Kamara had a down season by his standards last year, 1,337 total yards, just 9 touchdowns, second worst totals of his career thus far, and failed to hit that 81 reception mark that he's hit every year of his career. Had only 47 last year, but I think he'll be healthier this year. He'll also be in a better offensive situation. The Saints have more weapons with, first-round pick Chris Olave and Jarvis Landry added to the fold, and I think that Jameis Winston, if he can stay healthy for the entire year, could make this New Orleans Saints team, more of a contender than I think people are actually believing them to be. So if Alvin Kamara, if his suspension comes out to be anything less than 4 games, though, very well end up in my top 5 or top 6 running backs for me. But right now he's running back 9, and I'm happy to get him here at this price.
All right, guys, the pick is in, or maybe the fish is in, with my third pick in this FFWC Video Showdown Best Ball Draft. I go with Josh Allen, and when I made this pick, Billy Muzio, our gracious host, texted me, hey, you're the fish. You took the best the first quarterback off the board. I almost just said the best quarterback off the board, which he is. Listen, guys, in a lot of drafts, if Josh Allen falls to me in the third round, I'm going to heavily consider it. I don't love the third round, and sometimes even the fourth round in fantasy football drafts. I already went back-to-back running back. So I'm either looking at receiver or a quarterback here. And looking at the receivers, well, A.J. Brown, high ceiling. We don't know what the floor is. You know, Michael Pittman, guys like D.J. Moore, you know, Waddle, Diontae Johnson. They're all nice players, but they don't wow me. Josh Allen in this spot after a sturdy and sound Ekeler Mixon start to this draft, I'm going to pull the trigger on Josh Allen. I get it's a quarterback, but I'm out to win leagues, not to hang on the don't draft quarterbacks till late fantasy football Twitter trend. So I get my guy Josh Allen. He's already finished as the quarterback one in fantasy points per game in back-to-back seasons. I believe he has a really, really strong chance to repeat in that category. We know that Josh Allen can sling the damn football. He also brings a high rushing floor, number 3 quarterback in rushing touchdowns. Really the third best quarterback in just about every advanced rushing metric at Player Profiler, but there's one where he was the number 1 quarterback in advanced rushing stats, and that was red zone carries. He had 32 red zone carries, the number 1 quarterback in that category, and he just about is a top 10 guy in the most important quarterback metrics out there. I also love, and you guys know this if you follow me on Twitter, I'm a big Gabe Davis guy. I love the fact that Gabe Davis is getting the shot to line up opposite Steffon Diggs. I think that could potentially bolster Josh Allen's numbers even more. A young Gabe Davis, I'll take him over the veteran John Brown from a few years ago, or the veteran, great, but aging Emmanuel Sanders or Cole Beasley. I think this Gabriel Davis upgrade to being a starting wide receiver is going to be huge for Josh Allen. We know they have a rapport. So between what he does as a passer and what he does with his legs, it's clear that the Bills are going all in on the Super Bowl this year. Why not attach myself to the best fantasy quarterback for the past 2 years who has a really, really strong chance of repeating there? And again, if you look at some of these metrics, the number 1 quarterback in red zone attempts, deep ball attempts, overall pass attempts, game script, he's outstanding. He has the opportunity, and he doesn't waste the opportunities that he has in front of him. Go get Josh Allen in the third round if he's there. I'm all in on it. And of course, wait until later. I'm going for a Bill stack.
At the 305, the 33rd team selects Javonte Williams, running back out of Denver. I understand there's some concerns about the base case for Javonte Williams. Melvin Gordon has returned. They were in a 50-50 split last year. However, there is some upside purely because I don't think it's going to be a 50-50 split. Javonte is going to have more of that work. Melvin Gordon re-signed for significantly less money. Javonte Williams is entering year 2. The role should grow. He's a young ascending player. Melvin Gordon is nearly 30. And I think if we get a 55-45 split, I can still win this 12-team league, even getting RB15 caliber numbers out of Javonte Williams. However, if that split becomes 60-40 or 65-35, already he's paying off at ADP and then some. And if anything were to happen to Melvin Gordon, Javonte Williams can be the RB1 in fantasy.
With pick 306, the football diehards select Colts wide receiver Michael Pittman. Yes, I was totally hoping A.J. Brown would slide a little more, but Pittman clearly laid claim to the Colts wide receiver 1 spot last year. He caught 88 of 129 targets for 1,082 yards and 6 touchdowns. It wasn't like a stellar fantasy season by any stretch, but Pittman showed a lot of promise in a run-first offense. More importantly, he got true wide receiver 1 treatment from the coaching staff. Per Fantasy Pros, Pittman ran around on 96% of the offensive dropbacks, third only to Cooper Kupp and Jamar Chase through 17 weeks. He also finished the season tied for the league's 8th highest target share, 24%, and his 31% target share from weeks 13 to 18 is worth noting. This year, Matt Ryan takes over for Carson Wentz as the Colts quarterback. Ryan is a far cry from the 2016 MVP version who went to the Super Bowl, but his wide receiver 1 can be reliably counted on for 1,000 receiving yards. I'm not sure how far we are from seeing Pittman's ceiling, but he's in prime position to explore it.
Welcome back, everybody. Billy Musio here with Full-Time Fantasy again, and we have just hit the middle of the third round. I'm picking at the 3-7, and my boy Travis Etienne just landed to me. And unfortunately, we never got to see what could materialize last year with Travis Etienne after that Lisfranc injury derailed his rookie campaign. I'm excited to see him here in 2022, though. This offense is definitely going to be taking a step forward without Urban Meyer coaching this team. Etienne is an elite pass-catching back. And we all know that pass-catching backs are a cheat code in fantasy football. I would say that it's easy to compare him to somebody like the Detroit Lions running back DeAndre Swift. And Swift proved himself that he can still be an elite back even on a bad offense. So everyone's talking about how bad this offense still could be with the additions of Christian Kirk and the rest of the team. I still think that regardless of this team, Travis Etienne is a cheat code in fantasy football. He's going to be an elite pass catching back. He's also going to be utilized a lot on 1 and 2 downs because James Robinson is recovering from an injury and probably not going to be ready at the start of the season. Robinson had 164 carries last year. There's already 118 carries on the field that are available for the taking. You add in however many carries that Robinson's going to be missing, and we're talking about 280 plus carries that are going to be available for the taking in this backfield. It's wheels up and launch time for Travis Etienne. Welcome to the squad, homie.
All right, at 308, we chose DJ Moore, Carolina, new quarterback.
Pick. Yeah. Like kind of what you just said right there. Just them adding Baker Mayfield. DJ Moore was already kind of considered a higher priority type wide receiver pick. And again, we're having this wide receiver build is starting 3 wide receivers, so I felt like having a player like DJ Moore who can actually have the type of ceiling where it wouldn't surprise you if he ends up being a top 10 wide receiver at the end of the season. Upgraded quarterback, of course. He's one of those players where positive regression will enable him to hopefully get more touchdowns this season. So I like the pick, just strengthening that core for us.
Yeah, the alternative I think would have been going for a running back, but again, we're going to keep harping back to that 3 wide receiver set.
We were considering Connor and Akers.
Yeah. But the this value that I think we're seeing with DJ Moore with the addition of an improved quarterback play, I think puts him in another tier.
Yeah.
I'm glad y'all finally agree with me on Baker.
And with my third pick, I selected Mike Williams. Mike Williams is a lock, 3rd round pick. You got to take him there when he's available. Why? Mike Williams is a featured weapon in the red zone for one of the highest volume offenses on a team that does the least field goal kicking in the red zone. They don't kick field goals. They're only going for it on 4th down. And guess who Justin Herbert's favorite target is in the red zone? It's Mike Williams. He could easily lead the league in receiving touchdowns. It's very much in his range of outcomes. He's right there with Cooper Kupp and Mike Evans and Justin Jefferson in terms of the likelihood that this player leads the league in receiving touchdowns. His game has evolved. He was a prototypical outside clasher where they were pushing the ball downfield, 20 yards per reception. And then you notice last year, the target depth came down and the yards after the catch popped. So he is much more versatile than he's been advertised as. Mike Williams, top 15 yards after the catch last year, showing that, on both sides of the formation, whether it's Keenan Allen on one side, Mike Williams on the other, Justin Herbert's always going to have someone getting open in one of those key quadrants of the football field, and particularly in the red zone. We love Mike Williams, but even more than his red zone prowess, it's that he's in the right offense. You don't want to be taking wide receivers early that are in these bottom 10 offenses, whether they're the number 1 or number 2, I don't care, right? Mike Williams, number 1, number 2, he's a Charger. He's in the AFC West. It's going to be shootout after shootout. When you look at his game log, those games where he did the most damage, the common denominator is these were high-scoring games, and I think that there's going to be even more high-scoring games in the Chargers' future, playing the Raiders now with Davante Adams, Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, and the Broncos led by Russell Wilson. Give me all these Chargers. I want every single one, and the guy I have the most of is Mike Williams.
Hey, everybody. Adam Krautwurst of DraftSharks.com again. On the clock at the 3:10, and I took Jaylen Waddle to go with Saquon Barkley and Mike Evans. I was really looking for Michael Pittman Jr., D.J Moore, Mike Williams. They all went 3 picks in front of me. So I took our wide receiver 16 over at DraftSharks.com as the wide receiver 16 off the board, Jaylen Waddle. Gonna obviously take a step back this year. They added Tyreek Hill, one of the most explosive receivers maybe ever. But I still think he can do some stuff. This is best ball. I like his speed. I like his run after the catch. He had 140 targets last year. He won't get that again. I think he'll probably get around 120. He could get 125 targets. He set the rookie record last year for catches with 104. So I really like his talent. Tyreek Hill kind of suppresses his value, but in best ball, I'll take those 5 or 6 pop weeks to go along with the rest of my team here. So love my start in this must start 3 receiver league. Saquon Barkley, Mike Evans, Jaylen Waddle. And let's see what I can do here in the 4th round. I'm probably looking to go receiver again. Let's see if the right one falls to me.
Hey, this is Pat Fitzmaurice of Fantasy Pros, and with pick number 311 in the FFWC Video Showdown, I took Diontae Johnson. It was always going to be a wide receiver here after starting with Dalvin Cook and Najee Harris in the first 2 rounds. Really compelled to go wide receiver, and my targets were Michael Pittman, D.J Moore, and Mike Williams when it was down to 5 picks remaining, and of course, those 3 guys went in the picks before me. So I was forced to go with Diontae. Not ideal since I already have Najee Harris. Don't want to go overboard on the Steelers offense where there are questions about quarterback in the offensive line. But Diontae did have 107 catches for 1,161 yards and 8 touchdowns last year on the heels of an 88 catch season in 2020. So even with George Pickens coming aboard with the Steeler offense, I think Diontae's target load is pretty safe. And I don't think the offense could be any worse after seeing the decaying Ben Roethlisberger at quarterback last year.
At the 3.12, Best Bell Fantasy podcast selects Courtland Sutton. And he's going to be the wide receiver 1 in this Denver offense. He's built that way. He's a 6'3", 218-pound ex-wide receiver. He's got the agility. He's got the speed. He's got the catch radius, everything that Russell Wilson wants. And he's got some pedigree. 2nd-round draft capital. 700 receiving yards his rookie year, over 1,100 receiving yards his sophomore season. Dealt with an ACL injury, was fully recovered, had bad quarterback play, and now he's got a Hall of Fame quarterback in Russell Wilson. Also in this spot at the 312, I knew I needed a wide receiver that had high upside. I was also interested in the playoff shootout schedule, and especially in the championship where Denver faces off against Kansas City. So I wanted a piece of that offense. I kept that in mind.